How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to focus on this current tropical disturbance that's located just off of the Panama coast and determine if this will develop into Tropical Storm Bonnie now that the National Hurricane Center is forecasting this to have a moderate chance of developing right around the Caribbean. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at, of course, at the 5-day tropical weather outlook provided from the National Hurricane Center, and we do see that the chance has risen for this tropical disturbance just off the Panama coast, where now we have a moderate chance of tropical cyclone formation within the next 5 days, which is what I predicted in my last video, where yesterday I was the chance that the National Hurricane Center was giving was only a 20% chance within the next 5 days, and now of course the chance has risen to now a moderate 40% chance, which is just as I expected yesterday, because I thought that the conditions in the more long-term future, let's say closer to the Yucatan Peninsula, would be more favorable, and that the computer models would lean more towards a more favorable environment for tropical cyclone formation. And that's exactly what happened now that the National Hurricane Center is seeing what's a little bit further ahead when it comes to the track of this storm or the circumstances the storm will deal with. Now it's forecasting a higher moderate chance of developing with right around a 40% chance. So it is definitely something you need to be very closely monitoring right around Central America, because there is a good possibility we could see Tropical Storm Bonnie out of this. So make sure to pay very close attention to that. Now, to show you guys the current water vapor imagery, we do see that there's quite a bit of convection now going on throughout Central America, as a gyre is now developing in this area, and this gyre will be responsible for not only possibly developing Tropical Storm Bonnie just off the Caribbean, but as well as Tropical Storm Blast and potentially other tropical cyclones in the future for the Eastern Pacific and the western portion of the Caribbean, as well as the Gulf, potentially the Gulf of Mexico in the more long-term future. So we'll need to be tracking this beyond potentially Tropical Storm Bonnie, because this gyre is expected to stay around the same area for quite a while. And of course, with gyres, we tend to see a lot more convection over the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific throughout Central America, which is part of the reason why the season during the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere is considered winter for a lot of Central America, due to the abundance of moisture that's associated with some of these gyres we typically see during the early part of the summer. So as a result of that, we're going to see a lot more convection, and that convection could spur up some well-defined low pressure systems as a result of the amount of lift that we're seeing that we would see in the midst of a very convective environment. So it is definitely something we're going to need to pay very close attention to over not only the next several days, but potentially the next several weeks if this gyre continues throughout Central America. Now, taking a look at the current wind shear map, we do see that the area of moisture that we are focusing on is just off the coast of Panama and just off the coast of Costa Rica as well, where as of right now we do see that most of the Caribbean is experiencing very strong upper level winds equivalent to around 60 to 50 knots. However, I do expect the wind shear to subside, because we currently have an upper level low that's located, I'd say, just to the north of Cuba and Haiti and Dominican Republic, but that upper level low is expected to move further southwestward, and it should create a less hostile environment when it comes to wind shear, as the wind shear will move further westward, which would allow for a lightly sheared environment to take over a good portion of the Caribbean. So this moisture that we're seeing just off the coast of the Caribbean could easily structure itself to the point where it could develop a very well-defined low-level center for Tropical Storm Bonnie to develop out of. So So while the wind shear is strong right now, don't expect that to last because the wind shear should subside as this upper level low continues to move further southwestward. Now, taking a look at what the GFS model is saying when it comes to wind shear. Here's the upper level low, like I said, located somewhere between just to the north of Cuba and Hispaniola. That's expected to move further westward. We do see that low pressure system by right around the Thursday time frame moves towards the Yucatan Peninsula, and we see it sort of move to more towards Mexico, and that creates a lightly sheared environment for this low pressure system to develop and really structure itself to where it'll be in a very favorable environment for a developing tropical cyclone to occur just off the Central American coast. Now, in terms of what both of the computer models are forecasting when it comes to strength, it hasn't changed much since yesterday. I'd say the GFS model is still persistent on at least developing some sort of strong tropical storm to maybe a borderline hurricane just off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, still favoring that. Although the GFS model is a little bit weaker than yesterday's run, because the GFS model in yesterday's run was expecting a storm that was close to the 970 millibar range, which would definitely be more than capable hurricane at that point. Now it's taking a landfall more so around the 986 millibar range, which is certainly good news. That would mean a weaker storm, but I think 986 millibars could easily be considered a hurricane, especially if this develops a small circulation, which I think is forecast as a result of how small of an area that this low pressure system will really have will really have favorable conditions to develop from. So as a result, I do expect a smaller circulation. So a lower millibar pressure would mean that the wind speed would rapidly intensify relative to the drop in millibar pressure. So that's something to keep in mind, that GFS model wants to take maybe a borderline hurricane or a hurricane along the Yucatan Peninsula and just south of other Central American countries. So that's something to keep in mind, while the European model is still expecting not really much to develop. In fact, the European model has sort of weakened its forecast from developing a well-defined low pressure system to really nothing at all. If I were to show you guys a precipitation forecast to really give you guys a good idea on whether or not the European model wants to develop a well-defined low pressure system, if we were to continue to move forward, the European model is now agreeing that we will see at least some sort of low pressure come off of the Colombia coast and eventually move northward. However, what it's definitely disagreeing on is whether or not this develops, because we do see that nothing really develops out of this plume of moisture in the Caribbean, where we don't see a well-defined low pressure system and we don't really see an organized area of convection, as the European model is just primarily forecasting mainly just a disorganized area of moisture to move northward into Central America and pretty much revolve around this broad low pressure system, which is creating that gyre, and not really develop any sort of tropical storm. So still a pretty big difference when it comes to two computer models, because we have one that wants to take a hurricane, wants to develop a hurricane, while another almost doesn't, or pretty much doesn't want to develop anything at all. So that definitely raises the uncertainty with the forecast. We're going to need to see which computer model ends up winning out when it comes to the forecast, or maybe neither of them win out. Maybe it could be maybe a balance of the two, where maybe it's a weak tropical storm rather than a hurricane like the GFS model is stating, but a weak tropical storm would still be stronger than what the European model is currently forecasting. So still uncertainty regarding the strength, mainly because the two computer models are really just disagreeing on if we'll see a well-defined low pressure system develop or not. And it's really all due to the fact that the European model does not expect a high amount of moisture or a highly convective environment to exist throughout the Caribbean. If we were to take a look at the relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere between where the air pressure is 300 to 700 millibars, while there is moisture, you see that the moisture isn't really highly there isn't really a high amount of humidity or an extremely high amount of humidity that would represent a highly convective environment. Compare that to the GFS model where we see a lot more humidity, and as a result the environment is a lot more convective for a well-defined low pressure system to develop. Look at how much more moisture there is in the GFS model run, while like I said before, both of the computer models are primarily expecting a lightly sheared environment. The main really determinant that will determine if this low pressure system really develops or not is how much moisture there will be, or how convective the environment will be along the western portion of the Caribbean, because that will be huge in determining how much it strengthens. And also the land interaction will be important, because if this goes over land for a prolonged period of time, then more likely than not it will be much weaker. And that really all depends on the steering currents, because the main steering currents of the storm will be this Bermuda ridge located in the middle of the Atlantic, and this ridge that's going to develop right around the midwestern portion of the United States, which are both trying to move this northwestward and eventually westward. So we're going to need to see how far southwest this Bermuda ridge and how far south this ridge right around the Midwest will be to really determine how far west the storm will go, because the more west it goes, the less likely we're going to see a tropical storm develop as a result of the land interaction, which will increase friction and increase the disconnection from the very warm Gulf of Mexico water. So that's going to be something we're going to need to pay close attention to over the next several days. It seems like right now both of the computer models are primarily taking this offshore for the most part, but the European model wants to take the moisture a little bit further inland, which is inhibiting this plume of moisture to really develop any sort of low pressure system or well-defined low pressure system. So it's definitely something we're going to need to pay close attention to over the next several days. But just know that tropical storm is now very possible at this point. We're far past the point where the chance is either low or uncertain, because now, while it's still uncertain, we'll see tropical storm Bonnie, but I'd say it's definitely more certain than it has been over the past several days when I've been making these videos. So that's definitely something to pay very close attention to. And in terms of the track, let's say beyond Central America, I'm sure a lot of you guys are watching from the United States, want to know if this has a chance of moving up northward. At this point, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, because the GFS model wants to take this track further westward, more towards the coast of Mexico rather than northward. And this is as a direct result of this ridge that's expected to build, that's going to just try to steer the storm northward. The only way this could maybe take that turn northward is if we see a weakness in ridging, which is possible, because as you see in these ISO bars right here, we do see a trough dip, which could create a weakness to and ridging, where this could maybe steer northward, maybe towards Texas. But we have to wait and see. We're still very far out to really give a definitive answer regarding the track forecast beyond the 5-day mark, but I'll make sure to keep you guys updated regarding any changes in the forecast. Now, taking a look at the Saharan air layer forecast, which is another very important factor when determining if a tropical cyclone will develop or not. So you see that there's an abundance of Saharan dust. In fact, right now I'm located in the Dominican Republic, and all day today, while it was sunny, it was quite hazy in the sky, and that's a direct result of the amount of Saharan dust that's pretty much moving over the Caribbean islands and the entire Atlantic and the Caribbean at this point. And this could definitely inhibit tropical cyclone development if this dust moves further westward. At this point, while it seems like there's going to be a decent amount of dust that's going to try to move to where the storm wants to develop, I'm not sure if there will be necessarily enough concentration of dust to really inhibit tropical cyclone development, because we do see that. Look at how the dust pretty much clears out by the Thursday time frame, where although early we do see a lot of dust, you see that the dust quickly subsides as a more moist environment takes over just off the Central American coast. So this might not be as much of a problem as originally forecast, which does enhance the chance of Tropical Storm Bonnie developing, which is definitely something to keep in mind. But we're still gonna, so I'd say the Saharan dust as of right now won't be a major effect as a result of the highly convective and moist environment that's expected to move through, but it's still at least something to be aware of headed into later this week. Now, taking a look at my forecast regarding where I expect Tropical Storm Bonnie to move and potentially develop. So I'm expecting a track west-northwestward, where this primarily aims towards the Yucatan Peninsula, and in terms of United States impacts, it's still a little bit too early to say. It really all depends on how much weakness and ridging there will be, depending on how far south this next trough in the Midwestern United States dip to really determine if this has a chance to move northward. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding that. But Central America needs to pay attention, because whether this develops into a tropical storm or not, expect heavy rainfall and potentially flooding rains associated with this plume of moisture moving northward. So make sure to pay close attention to that. And of course, just south of Mexico, Tropical Storm Blast is expected to form, but I don't expect it to directly impact land. Just pay close attention to surf off the coast. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys have a great day.